Hey, I'm Stephanie Peirolo.
And I'm Eugene S. Robinson.
And welcome to the Bad Boss Brief. We are at episode 59, which we're calling The Bully Lie.
I always think about Butch from the Little Rascals. He was the first person that I understood as being a bully. Like I remember 4 years old, watching the Little Rascals and say, well, why do you push that kid into the mud? Well, that's what bullies do. I said, oh, okay. That's what bullies do, I guess. Okay. So
you realize, though, I just have to say how ancient that pop culture reference is.
and that's fine. I'm completely okay with being elderly. Yeah. And actual fact, what's interesting, though, here's a modern turn. What's interesting is that through the wonders of Facebook, a kid I grew up with. So in 1972, I moved into the house next door to him. And he said to me, apropos of nothing, he said, hey, man, you're a bully. A bully? He's like, yeah. And I didn't want to, negate his reality. And I was like, listen, man, I always loved you. I love you now. I have to say, in that context, I was just wanting the best for you. I wasn't the kind of bully that was making you feel lesser. I was wanting you to be more of who I thought it is that you were. And he was like, okay.
Okay.
He accepted that in lieu of an actual apology because I really did like him. And I really always wanted him to be better.
Right.
But he perceived it as bullying.
The reason that I picked this topic is not just because of the news, which we all watch about the bully in chief, but I had a situation, and I have to apologize. I have a cold, so there will be frequent applications of the mute button, and I have my lozenges and tea and all the things. So the reason that I thought about this is that I was in a situation recently where I was bullied. It wasn't at work. It was outside of a work situation. And it was interesting because that hasn't happened to me for a while. I haven't been in that circumstance. And I'm not going to go in the details because it was so upsetting to me, right? It was a man who did not like the decision that the organization had made and somehow blamed me for that decision, which was erroneous, and just kept attacking, went into very gendered, obscene sexual harassment behavior. And the organization has rules for this. They dealt with him, like there was a whole community that was observing this and dealing with it appropriately. But what surprised me is that I woke up in the middle of the night, like a couple of times. Like I was really impacted by this a lot more than I thought because I've been bullied in often gendered and sexualized terms for my entire working career, right? I mean, since I was a teenager working in restaurants. So it's not news to me, but I think because I've been out of the day-to-day corporate America for so long, it just surprised me, right? And the kind of unnecessary virulence of it. So that's what made me think I wanted to talk about bullying, because what I think about bullying is yes, we understand that a bully is someone who uses their power and influence to get other people to do things. But what I realized is that it's not even so much for bullies about the end, getting the money or their way or whatever. It's really about dominance. Like the bullying is the point, whether it accrues any benefit to the bully or not. It's just an exercise of dominance. What do you think about that as a definition, as a working hypothesis?
I wonder, I mean, there's a comedian did this bit about, you're in trouble when you encounter somebody who doesn't like you and they're happy to see you. Right. So, I mean, when in instances as an older person now, when I've been confronted with a bully, it is like the I Love Lucy thing. Slowly I turn. I can't believe my good fortune that God has introduced somebody down my alleyway who's going to give me the opportunity to give them a teachable moment, So I haven't been blind. I was blindsided, actually. I was blindsided. I can give you the date that I was blindsided. It was 2012. And the person who blindsided me was convicted felon Carlos Watson. And he did it in a really effective way. He lured you in. Hey, how's your family? How are things going on? And 5 minutes into this very nice kind of homily about family and things that you like and care about, brought the hammer down, and I didn't see it coming. And unlike you, I didn't have any antecedent. I was bullied one time, and I've written about it before, and it was, I was, I don't want to make the show excessively dark, but I was tied to a pole, and it got weird, and it was horrible. But I didn't have a sustained early life of bullying. So when Watson did it to me, it was indeed a pretty big surprise. And of course, it was an employment setting. So the normal coping mechanisms, which is to, flip out, throw the person to the ground, and put them in a chokehold, that doesn't necessarily. So it was an interesting, I understand you're waking up in the middle of the night because, like, how do you deal with this? And in this context, keep your job. How do you deal with this if this person is your boss? How do you deal with this if you don't have recourse to that, the great American schoolyard leveler of being able to strike back at this other person? And I think the helplessness of it is exactly undergirds what you're talking about. You can't enjoy dominance if you can't enjoy the other person's helplessness. And that is the aspect of it that they glom onto. And that is, if you are the person being bullied, that is the worst part about it. Even if it's not true helplessness, if it's perceived helplessness, or if it's momentary helplessness, it's like one of those dreams where you have sleep paralysis. It's terrible. It's terrible to be in a situation as an adult where you could do something, but you can't do something. That is bad.
Well, and the idea that you're talking about with Carlos is that there's multiple kinds of bullies, but I think we think of the obvious bully, the person who is throwing chairs, screaming and yelling, who is, wreaking havoc in a very obvious way to demonstrate their power and their dominance. But there are a lot of people who are subtler. Like you said, they pull you in, they convince you of their narrative. They have a very polished public persona. Like, there was an interesting video that went around a few weeks ago about Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, was getting out of a plane. And as he's standing at the top, you could see his wife, Bridget, pushing him in the face. Like his whole face, very hard, like to the point where he had to step back.
Right.
And what's interesting there, and I don't know much of those dynamics aside from the kind of gossipy things that I read in the press, but when they met, she was his high school teacher. She was 39 and he was 15. And, they developed a relationship later. But, he's the same age as her kids, and they've been together essentially, ever since then, with breaks supposedly when he was very young. And again, so it started on a power imbalance. And, you're seeing physical violence clearly, although, President Macron is saying that it was a joke. It was rough housing. It was whatever. I have a great time with my husband. Never have I felt the need to lay hands on him in jest or otherwise. Right. Like, not, happening.
Well, this thing, I'm sure you've been this social media meme of 100 men versus a silverback gorilla. Right. So and then they do this survey where they say many American men, a majority of American men, believe they could fist fight a tiger. And so there are all these things that indicate that clearly the people we share this country with are crazy. But one of the things that I thought interesting, if you start to read through some of these, is that most big cats, lions, and tigers are actually not fighters. They are ambush hunters. So they do not fight with each other, or they will attack you. But if you do offer some sort of resistance, they're out, because, as big as they are, if they're fighting somebody bigger, they tend to take a lot of damage, and they don't want to take damage. So I started to think about that bullies are actually, similarly, bullies are ambush hunters, right? It's rare for a bully to actually follow through on the threat of, I'm going to kick your ass is very different from kicking your ass. So it's the fear that they like to engender. And it is these subtle reminders like the face palm that, which I'm sure Macron was surprised about. I mean, I don't know what he did to warrant it, but as you suggest, it clearly probably wasn't the first time. but they don't want to fight. They want to attack. And to have a perfect attack, you have to have somebody who's willing to absorb it. So it's a really weird situation. And again, in America, she would have been arrested. So, this is what nowadays what happens. So.
Well, what's interesting to me is, and I've mentioned this before, and I've talked about it in my Substack, the Consigliere papers. But the best thing I've heard about bullies recently is something from Masha Gessen, who is a journalist who grew up in Russia and writes extensively about dictators and autocracy. They talk about growing up under Putin. And they have a phrase called the bully lie or the power lie. And I listened to an episode a few months back of This American Life where they talk about it. And I'm just going to quote a paragraph because I think it so summarizes this bully narrative. However unskilled a person may be at lying, they usually hope that the lie will be convincing. Executives want shareholders to think that they have devised a foolproof path to profits. Defendants want juries to believe that there is a chance that someone else committed the crime. The Trumpian lie is different. It is the power lie or the bully lie. It is the lie of the bigger kid who took your hat and is wearing it while denying that he took it. There is no defense against this lie because the point of the lie is to assert power, to show I can say what I want when I want to. The power lie conjures a different reality that demands that you choose between your experience and the bully's demand.
Right. And it also suggests the unasked question, but that exists nonetheless. What are you going to do about it? Right? What are you going to do about it? And that zero sum he apparently picked this up from Roy Cohn. And Roy Cohn brought this to bear with Alger Hiss, Joseph McCarthy, Nixon, and all of the other great scumbags of American history. So, it is, what are you going to do about it? And that is probably a horrible way to go through your day, but I think it's a very real way of going through your day in America and probably has been.
Well, and I mean, I think for most bullies, my impression of most bullies, male or female, is that they are weak, frightened individuals who are internally incredibly miserable. And I think their family lives, their relationships or lack thereof with children and spouses demonstrate what it is to carry this way of moving through the world. But I think what's interesting, and we are going to talk more in a little bit about specific ways you can deal with bullies at work, which is the topic that we're exploring. But I think that the notion of the bully lie is really important, particularly for women. Right. So you mentioned earlier that you have not been bullied a lot. I have been bullied since I was a child. And I think that there is something about the bully lie that is going to resonate for a lot of people, not just women, for a lot of people who were bullied in their families, bullied in their religious communities, who were bullied culturally, because what happens with the power lie, at least for me, was that I started to doubt my own reality.
Yeah.
I started to think maybe truth is fungible and that if the bully has taken my hat and is wearing my hat and I can see my hat on his head, maybe there's something wrong with my perception. And the domino effect of not feeling like you can trust your own experience, understanding, or interpretation of reality is devastating. And I think part of the reason there are these cycles of bullies is that if you are told that you can't possibly be accurate in your assessment of reality as it appears to you, very clear. I'm not talking about interpretation. I'm talking about the sky is blue, the hat is on the bully, you have a black eye. If you are told that you're wrong in perceiving that, then I think you are set up to be more susceptible to that bullying and to that kind of, they talk about fight, flight, or freeze. I think there can be a freeze when your brain can't get around what is happening. And so you can't fight back.
The most horrible thing I had to be a party to was a calculus class at Stuyvesant High School, 1979. Teacher was Phil Fisher. And he walks into the room and he writes on the board 2 + 2, and this is calculus. 2 + 2 equals, And he says, anybody have an answer for this? And, the class goody two shoes, not seeing him for what he was, raised her hand. He said, yes. And she goes, 4. And he slams his fist down on the desk, throws some stuff on the floor, kind of knits his brow, and he says, listen, I'm going to ask you again. And then 2 plus 2. And she goes, 4, this time a little bit more diffident. And he repeats his performance, the chair is now thrown across the room. He looks down for this kind of dramatic 30 seconds. He goes, I'm going to ask you one last time. And she goes, 2 plus 2. And she goes, 5. And he burst out laughing. What he didn't count on is the fact that she's a human being, and she starts sobbing and crying right away. He walks over to her, pats her on the shoulder, goes, it's okay, walks back to the blackboard, erases it. It teaches calculus. Never talks about what just happened, never talks about what he was trying to illustrate, never talks about, and I hope to God, at this point he's passed on, but that he was somehow called on the carpet for that. But the sadism of that is stuck with me over the years, and that man clearly shouldn't have been in a classroom with students. So yeah, it's bullying. I have no doubt that he was a miserable fellow, but how to deal with it is a continued mystery for me, because it does undermine your sense of reality, as it did in this case.
Right. And again, I think it's not coincidental that he was addressing that to a female student.
Yes.
Right. And that she was the one who, and I think, probably young men would have done the same thing. So let's talk a little bit about what are some things that you can do if you are faced with a bully or someone who uses this bully lie dominance mentality at the workplace, right? And the first thing I want to say, which we say all the time, but I'm going to reiterate here, is you need to keep yourself safe, right? So, you need to be intentional about if some of the tactics I'm about to suggest are going to jeopardize your physical safety, your emotional safety, your employment. If your, employer or someone that you're standing up to is going to call immigration on you. I mean, there's like very real consequences that you need to consider before you go and do this stuff. But the first one is, if you have a bully like this in your workplace, the first thing to do is to name it. Right? Mm-hmm. Even if you just say it to yourself. And I think, again, this is particularly important for women or anyone who has had their understanding of reality distorted or discredited. Just name it. This is bullying. This is abusive behavior. And be grounded in your own reality, and start with yourself. Then maybe start saying it to safer people. Because for me, I know, when I'm in these situations, and it was my mom who would do this, like the distortion thing. I started out like questioning myself, but then I would go to friends and be like, is this normal? Is this what's supposed to happen? And I still do that. I need a check-in. I think this is true, but I need somebody who can say, not just, yeah, that's not appropriate, but who can actually say, what the actual fuck? He said, what? You need to go to HR. Right. And so naming it to yourself, and then naming it to safe community or friends, and then assessing, is it appropriate for you to name it to someone who could do something, right? Like HR, if you can trust HR, or someone who could potentially be an ally.
No, you can't trust HR. So,
okay.
Just want to get that in there, please. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably not. But the idea is, at least start with, even if you can't go to HR, start by naming it yourself and getting other people who will validate your experience of reality, right? Because I'm guessing it's probably, at least for me, often it was worse than what I would admit to myself, right? It was worse than what I thought. The second thing is to understand your own history with bullies or conflict, right? I mean, like you were mentioning earlier, it's not something that you have experienced a lot, although it sounds like you had a very traumatic bullying experience. And I just am so sorry that happened to you. But I think realizing what it is that's coming up for you, right? Like I was, like I said, surprised that it was keeping me up at night, this recent, bullying incident, because generally I am the kind of person that will, I have very little patience for bullies, especially if they're attacking someone who works for me or who I care for. And I am not at all afraid of conflict, right? I mean, not at all. I have been known I'm a very tall person and I will go literally like nose to nose with men who are, behaving in a way that's inappropriate, particularly to other people. But I think if you are not someone who can handle conflict, if you are someone who does have a history of bullying, who does have, PTSD, or you have, really strong trauma reactions, you need to be intentional about that because you may need a lot of help to confront or address a situation.
Yeah. I know some of the very toughest guys I know have gotten there as a result of having just really significant bullying issues. And there's a reason they're hair trigger. They have decided pretty much on their way to being really tough guys that whatever happened to make them do would never happen again. So they tend to, or what is it that Bibi Netanyahu once said that it stuck with me? He goes, given the history of my people on this planet, if I have a choice between overreacting and underreacting, I'm going to overreact. Now, I'm not a fan of Bibi, but I do like if it comes down to it, yeah, let's overreact.
Well, and the other next one is gather your community, like really get your people around you. There's a video that is shown up frequently on social media. It's kind of a meme, and it's an older video of a soccer game or football, for those of you that are listening in Europe, where a younger female referee is holding up a line, like she's obviously made some sort of judgment. And there's a soccer player, professional, who is nose to nose with her, screaming, right? And the point of the video is like kind of raise your daughters to have this much confidence because she's standing there nose to nose with him and not backing down. But what I appreciate about the video is the second part of the clip is another referee, a man who is a big guy. He's even bigger than the soccer player. He comes running over. I mean, he is barreling over, and he inserts himself between the woman referee and the man, and he throws up a red card, and he is yelling. And that's what I mean, is that what impressed me about that is, yes, that woman stood toe to toe with that guy, but she was much smaller and clearly in a position of some difficulty. And this other referee booked from wherever he was on that field and was in this guy, and he was like body checking him to get him out of the way and threw him out of the game, clearly.
Well, what's funny about that is if you have bullying in your history and you, as a grown-up, you're in a position to stop it, again, you tend to overreact. I'm on an airplane with my wife and my young daughter, and I'm putting stuff away and I'm not really paying attention. And suddenly I'm aware on the periphery of my vision that there's some struggle going on. And apparently my wife has decided to lean her seat back, and the guy behind her has shoved the seat forward. I flipped out. I flipped, much like that slightly overweight ref. I was there in a second. And this is at the beginning of an 11-hour flight. And I told the guy, you can enjoy the rest of your flight conscious, or you can enjoy it unconsciously. But, I paid for that seat, and she can do what she wants with the seat. I'm not going to debate. I'm not going to negotiate about maybe halfway. I'm not going to, no, because the only reason he did it was because he didn't perceive that we were together. He just thought, this is a woman with a kid, and I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want because, I'm a man. And she's like, what you going to do? And it was 0 to 60 in about half a second. So yeah, that's the thing. When you bully people as adults, you create allies in a very strange and unexpected way. Because I could see he was completely blindsided. He had no idea that I was going to come in that hot. And in actual fact, I had no idea I was going to come in that hot. But it's like, come on, I read it in the paper. These people have these air. I don't want any part of that. Relax. I fly a lot. Relax. So,
Right. Well, and that brings us to the next point, which is don't argue with the bully.
Yeah, right? Correct.
Set your boundary and then, walk away if you can, but don't argue with them, because I think that's part of the challenge, especially with the more subtle and intelligent bullies, is they want to engage you in the bully lie. right? They want to engage you in their alternative exercise of whatever's happening, right? Like, so the bully that I'm talking about in my personal experience tried to do that, right? There were lies about what I had done and a false equivalency. And it's like, oh no, I'm not having a conversation with you where I am defending myself against your scurrilous, whatever it is that you're like, I'm not participating. Right. And I think that's a tough one because, especially if you've been bullied in your life, you want to defend yourself, right? It's a human nature thing. Like, I never said that. That's not true. And you can have all of this energy go to, let me argue. It's like, no, I'm not. To me, talking with a bully is the same as talking with somebody who's drunk or high. Like, right. What is the point? They don't have the capacity for reason or argument. So just, stay away from them.
Yeah. That's if you're in a situation where you can, that is always the best way to go about it.
Right.
And eventually, or there's something I would add, if you are stuck in a work situation, as I was with convicted felon Carlos Watson, what I started to do was to piecemeal our relationship so that I could get it to a place where it was comfortable for me. So he used to curse at me, and I said, that, you stop, don't ever do this with me again. I don't like it. So he actually at one point I could see he had made an alteration because he goes and he was gonna say bullshit, and he goes that BS, and I stopped him. I go, that's it. Using an acronym here doesn't help. I don't want that kind of talk. And he stopped that as well. Yeah. So you just have to be very patient. And I wasn't arguing with him. I was laying down a boundary, and to his credit, he adhered to these boundaries. But it was like, what is that? There's some band, a 10-yard fight. It was a 10-yard fight, right, for a lot of 10 yards. So.
Well, and some of that also, I read a lot of old British murder mysteries for comfort, oddly. But there was a phrase that came up in one last night: start as you intend to go on, right? So set your boundaries and how you intend to be treated out of the gate and be consistent to them. Because one of the things I found with bullies is that they are those kind of stealth ambush hunters. If you turn to them and are really clear, like, that's not going to fly, they will sometimes step back, right? And so the idea of saying, and maybe you can't address all of the whole scope of, in your case, like the things that were going on with Carlos, but, to take a piece and start with that. But and that gets to the last point, which again is kind of where we started, is you do need to protect yourself, right? So there used to be advice that was given to women who were married to alcoholics, even if things were going okay or their husband was sober at the time. Keep your car keys, extra set of car keys, and $100 cash in the garage where you can get to it, so that you and the kids can leave at any time. You don't have to find your keys. You don't have to find your purse. You just can go. And I really like that metaphorically. And I think that if you are working for a bully, it's probably good to have your metaphorical extra set of keys and your mad money someplace close. And in that case, what it might mean is recognize you could be fired at any moment. So don't have anything personal on your laptop. Have, your files backed up, and have an extra phone in case, because so much of our technology can be shared between our work and our private lives. Keep that demarcation. Be ready to walk out. Be ready to walk out the door, because that way you're prepared. And so think about what for you, if you are in a bully situation, even if you don't plan on confronting the bully, right? What is your getaway plan? What is your ready to leave at any moment strategy?
Which, of course, has another film antecedent, the movie Heat, with Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, and the late Val Kilmer, where the set piece was be prepared to walk away, at the slightest drop of, I don't have, like you say, I'm not going to go back for this or that. You got to be able to walk away to be, and of course, spoiler alert, De Niro fails to do this. So.
Right. And so these are the kinds of things that I think you can look at doing if it's safe for you, dealing with a bully in your workplace. But I think, again, if we can, the one thing we can start, like it was funny. I was being interviewed this morning and talking about, in my book, there's a whole section about narratives, right? And I think the reason I realized, like the reason that, and it basically says in order to make an effective decision, you need to examine the familial and cultural narratives that you were fed as a young person so that you can figure out if they're still true for you, right? Why are we being limited by old narratives? And I realized the reason that I did that is because of my mom and her bully lies. And it's made me really alive to the narrative. So even if you are stuck and you can't get away from the bully, the idea of really tuning into what is true for you. How do you own your own reality? There is a strength in that. And there's just a resilience in saying, I know this to be true, and I'm going to honor that to the best of my ability. That is standing up to the bully, even if you're only doing it in your own mind.
Right. Yeah, every bit helps.
Yes. So that's all we have time for today. If you have any questions, want our advice, have any suggestions for future topics, WTF@badbossbrief.com. WTF@badbossbrief.com. I read every single email, and we will be back and talk to you again in a couple of weeks. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Adios.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Bad Boss Brief podcast with your hosts, Eugene S. Robinson and Stephanie Peirolo. You can check out more of their work by visiting consigliera.substack.com for Stephanie and eugenesrobinson.substack.com for Eugene. You can also find Eugene at Mr. Sleep 3, that's number 3, on Instagram. Reach out with your questions, concerns, work case situations, or suggestions to us at WTF@badbossbrief.com. We personally answer every submission. Be sure to join us at badbossbrief.substack.com every other Wednesday for episodes of Bad Boss Brief so you can gain further insights into your workplace environments. Until next time, don't be an asshole at work.